Hi everyone, I am Koshambi Mujumdar Mishti. I am studying Master of Education at Macquarie University. Before I begin, I want to acknowledge the Walamattagal people of the Darug Nation, the traditional custodians of the land on which I live and learn. I want to pay my respect to their elders past and present, and I also extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. So I am originally from Bangladesh. And honestly, I came here with very little knowledge about indigenous communities in Australia. I have realized that there are a lot of gaps in what I knew, and this presentation is about how I am learning and unlearning so that I can become a more culturally responsive educator. I really started thinking deeply about indigenous education after coming in Macquarie. One of the quote that completely shifted my thinking was by Professor Rigni that curriculum didn't arrive on a boat, pedagogy didn't arrive on a boat, it was always here. So it made me realize that education didn't start with colonization. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples have had their own education system long before the colonization. They still have a rich and sophisticated knowledge system. I also came across Nakata's idea of cultural interface, where the indigenous and the Western knowledge can meet. What it told me is that indigenous content isn't something you just add in. It it's something that belongs here already. So back home our education system is still very colonial. I was mostly taught Western knowledge. So when I arrived in Australia I was carrying those same biases. I didn't think about what was missing, but I started to learn more about the indigenous perspective. As Hogarth says that when indigenous histories are excluded from the curriculum, it can lead to deficit views. It really caught me. It really resonated with me. So now I am trying to be more conscious of my worldview. Now I constantly remind myself that my way of seeing the world isn't the only way. As an educator, I want to keep expanding my understanding. I don't want to make just any assumptions. One of the biggest lessons I have learned is the importance of critical self-awareness. Oskin Oskinagis says that teaching indigenous content will actually start with looking at yourself, your belief, your biases, even your own privileges. McDowell talks about something called uncomfortable reflexivity. What it really means is sitting with the discomfort of realizing that you might have been wrong. Honestly, it is uncomfortable sometimes, but it is necessary. For example, that I used to think being colorblind was fair. Now I know that ignoring a student's cultural identity can actually do harm. On that term, Kiket Tucker and her colleagues really really emphasized well that we need to be brave enough to name the race and culture because that's how we create safe inclusive spaces for all the students. So I am learning to ask myself the tough questions and reflect on how I should teach and why. Learning about the history of colonization in Australia education was deeply confronting for me. I read about the stolen generations when the Aboriginal children are taken from their families to mission school to be re-educated. Those schools were designed to erase the language, the culture, the identity. Even now, they have left deep impacts on indigenous students. They still experience the effect of that trauma today. I used to believe that Western education is the gold standard, but now I realize that indigenous pedagogies are pushed aside and it needs to be changed. I can't teach in Australia without acknowledging this history as Professor Bishop says that we have to move past the old imperial agenda and we need to start teaching in a way that is truthful and respectful. So, where do I stand now? Uh, so, I am an indigenous educator, but I am committed to do this work, and my work comes with responsibility. AITSL standard made it clear that we are expected to understand how culture and identify the impact of learning and to show respect for indigenous histories and languages. For me, that means I will include indigenous perspective across the subjects, whether it's science, arts, or anything else. And most importantly, I will listen. I am not trying to speak for the indigenous community, but I want to learn from them. I will seek guidance from respectful elders, educators, and the communities. For me, it's all about humility, and I know that if I want to create a culturally safe classroom, I have to do that work every single day. These are the references I used for this standpoint. Uh, in short, my journey is a journey of learning, unlearning, and reflecting. I have a long way to go, but I'm committed to growing. Thank you.